Hey, and welcome to the World Tour of Meditation. Our purpose here is to dispel popular myths around meditation so that you can actually access deep inner peace, joy, and calm. And today I'm so thrilled to have with us Charanpal. And Charanpal is this amazing Kundalini yoga teacher. She's a leader in her community. She has a master's in spiritual psychology. And I was so gifted to meet her at one of her workshops. And I'll tell you more about that later if it comes up. Welcome, Charanpal.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being here. And I forgot to ask, how do you pronounce your name?
Charanpal, or Charan with the hard R, is
Charan.
often how people say it.
Okay, great, great. Is there anything else you'd like to add about your background or what's brought you to where you are today?
Well, it's been an interesting path. um, I'll just add that it was really an honor to have you reach out to me about this, and that when we had the discussion about what we were going to talk about, it kind of took a left turn, right?
100%. So, full disclosure, I reached out to Charan because I find her classes extraordinary. I went to one of her classes. It was like 45 minutes, an hour. It was like a normal class length, but I felt like I just done like a 3-day deep dive retreat of Kripalu. Like that's what I got in that hour. And I was like, wow, I want to talk to her about how she goes so deep and how she holds that space. And we got on the phone and we instead started talking about a totally different myth and direction and common thing that comes up in the wellness community over and over and over. So I think that's what we're going to dive into today, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. Do you want to broach the subject or shall I?
Sure. When Daksha reached out to me, when you reached out to me, and we're asking about, where I feel like I'm most comfortable talking in the realms of spirituality, in the realms of meditation, we had in our community, in the Kundalini community, just been hit with really heavy, hard news that our teacher, Yogi Bhajan, who's been out of his body for many, many years now, but all these criminal and sexual allegations have come out into the light about him. And so I couldn't continue the conversation with you without, like, immediately I felt all this cognitive dissonance about talking about meditation, and then in the background I'm just like, in my mind I'm like, but this is really hard to talk about without also acknowledging, the pain that we're going through as a community. And it's not just my community, obviously. This is something, it's a very common issue that we're seeing more and more frequently.
Right. So we're talking today about why spiritual power gets so abused, and then what do you do? Like, what do you do with the teachings when something like that can happen in the community? How do you heal and move through? Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
How do you heal and move through it? And being someone that's witnessed other communities go through this, and then have now in the thick of it myself, it's been really eye-opening and awakening, and an open door into the realms of compassion,
oh,
and seeing how there's not one way. you know there's not one way to maneuver through it. Everyone will find their unique way to maneuver through it that will feel right to them, that they'll locate. My prayer is everyone locates their own truth and moves from there. And then it's so interesting to see, on the subject of truth, how there's different truths out there. And you had shared something so beautiful that I really resonated with.
I brought it. This is the one. So, for those of you watching, this is a bottle from Orasoma. It's a system that Mike Booth talks about, and I think day 4 of the series. And this is about the marriage of truth and love. And what I was sharing with Sharon is that, when truth and love live together and then truth goes out into the world, he comes back and he's all battered up. And love goes, "What happened, sweetie? Why are you so beat up?" And then he says, "I went out in the world and there were all these other truths and I met them. And and love didn't come along. So I met all these truths and I got battered up." And so here is the possibility for love to rescue that truth, really.
Mm,
Yeah.
Yeah. There's like a personal truth.
Mm.
There's the circumstantial truth, the situational truth, and then there's the some will call it like the universal truth, or the truth that the one who witnesses all witnesses. And it's just as humans, it's really awakening to recognize all the different facets of truth, and to understand that, our personal truth might not be what's true for others, and to allow people to have their process with the truth, with their own truth.
Mm. And
Yeah.
about compassion there. And there's one other thing I want to ask you before we go further down this. You said that you'd witnessed other communities go through this, and I would imagine many people listening to us are either in your community and going through this, or have witnessed other communities go through this. And so, what would you say is the biggest difference between witnessing someone else or hearing about this on the news, witnessing someone else go through this versus being in the thick of it right now as you are?
It's the direct, raw emotional experience of it being directly tied to the teacher, and having the wool pulled out. Um, I feel like it's more like a visceral feeling. I'm just, speaking from experience, from my personal experience of what it feels. What the difference has been is it's a difference in the visceral feeling somatically in my body versus watching it through just a lens as a spectator almost, or a person that's not as directly involved, but just witnessing. Now I'm witnessing, but I'm also very much in the feeling.
What is that feeling, and how does being in the feeling lead to different kinds of thoughts or approaches to truth than if you were watching from outside?
That's a great question. The feeling has gone from it vacillates, the feelings that I've and it changes day to day for me. At first there was anger, and the anger kind of dissolved, and then there's been tremendous sadness. Um, and the sadness dissolves too, and then there's this beautiful, like, um, broader perspective. And I don't know if there's a feeling associated with that other than hopefulness, and those are the three main ones that I've been vacillating between. And when witnessing, I think when witnessing other communities, there's been like an empathy, and you know for me personally, just like a neutralized viewing of it, and here in the thick of it, of the experience, it's been an interesting dance with neutrality, and understanding the difference between neutral in the sense that love is neutral, but also not wanting to be neutral in the sense of inaction, or uh, not caring.
Mhm. Can I ask what your emotions are towards, right, and how you've navigated this, what you hear people around you say, towards your teacher?
Mm.
And I ask that because I shared this with you earlier, but the last time prior to talking with you for this show, I had a conversation around this topic with someone, um, because this is something that had happened years before my participation, but this is something that happened in my own lineage of yoga. And I was sharing the story with someone, and we had a disagreement about how one should treat that person. And my friend crashed the car. And it got so, yeah. So will you speak to that?
Mm.
You're going through that.
Yeah, yeah. It's it's been similar to the vacillations of just allowing the emotions, but directly relating to my link to him, so to speak, has been very drastically cut off. Um, with a few exceptions. Now, I never met him when he was in his body. I came to the yoga practice after he passed, um, and yet, like many in my community, whether you met him in person or not, we all linked to him because he represented to us a very caring, stern, loving father presence. And you know, I can say that that has something that has been a lifelong struggle for me to have a, you know, I feel like my relationship with my own father has been like I'm his teacher, which I'm sure a lot of children feel towards their parents, but, you know, to have a fatherly figure in your life that is also your guide, that is also your teacher, that is also wise, and you think wiser, and until you learn something like this of their transgressions. And this is not to say that Yogi Bhajan wasn't wise. He was actually um, an extremely divine channel at times, where the words that he said were ultimate truths, and you know, that could shake someone awake in their consciousness. You know, you could take away his name from a quote and, you know, just take his name away now that we know what we know about him, and it would resonate in the hearts of millions. So, but I personally began connecting to him once I did my teacher trainings, and we would watch all these videos and learn about him more and more. And it became, I didn't start the practice with a connection to him. I was very much connected to my first Kundalini teacher, and he's a radiant, dynamic man. So I was always just drawn to him and his channel. And then when I went to do my teacher training, that was when I was, I will say, inundated with Yogi Bhajanisms. So that link began, and when I would meditate or when I would kind of reach out in the etheric space, I would reach out to him, and I would hear his voice, and he would visit me in dreams. And this is, I am not alone in this. There were, you know, many, pretty much everyone you talk to in this that has this practice has that connection, that link to him. We call it the link in the golden chain. And so since all of this has come forward, um, I haven't reached out, but it was such a habit to reach out that there's moments in my personal meditations where my brain just naturally goes and thinks of him and wants to reach out to him. And I consciously this is what I do. This is my own process. I go, I forgive you, but I can't reach out to you right now.
Have you decided not to reach out to him? And have you thought about reaching out to ask him about this and what he has to say?
Actually, it's interesting you ask that, because there is a psychic medium that I've gone to over the years. She goes to our events at Solstice. She's not necessarily a Kundalini yoga practitioner, but she's very much a part of our community. And she has a booth at the Solstice events, and I would go there. It was like a yearly thing to go there, and she channels some very, very directly and profoundly. And so I've been wanting to talk to her about, have you been talking to him about this? Like, what does he have to say? You know, is there an apology? Is there an explanation? Is there anything? And so that's something that I think once I feel more healed and resolved, that I would like to do.
Okay, so it's more the rawness of the emotion and the process of going through this cognitive dissonance, this rupture of sorts, that necessitates that cutting off.
The distance right now feels appropriate. It feels, but it's interesting in my own personal experience with this, and I know many people have different experiences, but I've been extremely disappointed and saddened and shocked. Um, but I've never truly felt like vilifying him. This is just my personal experience. I've never vilified him in my mind or demonized him in any way. I just feel like, wow, that is that must have been a really like intense polarity within one person to deal with.
Maybe. Wow. And does that bring up compassion?
Absolutely.
Oh, except,
And it's a cliche, but it has been said over and over, the brighter a person's light, the darker the intensity of their darkness. I don't know if that's not an excuse by any means, and yet we see this over and over again.
so tell me, before you got involved with Kundalini Yoga, or as you were getting involved with it, I hear so many people, particularly in the West, but now also in the East, also in India, be like, I don't need a guru, like I don't need a teacher, like I'm not giving away my personal authority to anybody. So, and I mean, I have my own views on this. I don't think you're giving away your personal authority unless you do. But how did you navigate that? Because obviously now that's shifting, right? And so
Very much so.
that coming in, how come you were okay with that? Because I can imagine people listening to this conversation as they listen to like similar topics like on the news over and over all across the world and be like, yeah, I don't need anyone to guide me, I don't need any teacher. So how did you even come to it, knowing that these things do happen, um, and be open to receiving that kind of guidance, that kind of connection?
Yeah, it straight up, it was a blind faith. And I've always turned to myself first when making decisions and listening to my soul. I In my studies in graduate school, I learned how to do that more and more. And then as you dive deeper and deeper into meditation, we do like 2.5 hour meditations. I did a Vipassana retreat. Like that practice of turning inward has become very important practice. And at the same time, when I would find myself up against um, a lack of clarity in my own person, the seeking guidance outward was often very helpful. I would go see, I have someone I go to that she talks to angels. And whenever I get off the phone with her, I feel immense clarity, like, the blocks have been opened, and that I was struggling with on my own. So I think it's just human to struggle at times with our own clarity because we're so in it, we're so in it. Whereas, like, people come to me all the time for guidance and mentorship, and I can see it in their energy or through their words clear as day what they're wanting to do. I'm like, I just want to point out to you that you've said this, this, and this, and it's very clear this is what you want. And they go, oh gosh, thank you. I'm like, you're the one that said it. So to have that reflection, I think, is, to have someone else hold up a mirror is really helpful at times. And I think we all can experience that to varying degrees. And to have someone be an authority over our lives and over our will is a whole different issue.
Ah,
And that is what, if you read the memoir that started the whole um, revealing of stories with regard to our teacher Yogi Bhajan, um, it really reveals very gracefully how someone can mastermind their manipulations and then be able to call the shots on everything in your life. And that is what that memoir, when I finally went and read it, that was what was the most revealing thing to me, was how someone could be set up in a position, and there's all sorts of carrot dangling, there's all sorts of promises, empty promises, and we see this actually to varying degrees. We see it often. I have people that come to me for mentorship, and they're in the corporate world, and it's very manipulative there. yes, we'll give you that job, we'll give you that promotion, we'll give you this and that, but we need to see XYZ. And there's a parallel there.
So, do you think it's okay in that world and not okay in the wellness world? Or, like, do you think that both ways, authority in that format is?
I think it's precarious in all arenas
I love
to
that.
abuse. Yeah, it's precarious because the people in power, it's precarious when you hold that power, whether you're going to use it for the good or whether you're going to abuse it. And it's precarious when you're in a position where somebody has authority over you, like a boss or like a guru, and whether you're going to allow them to direct you in certain ways that go against your own innate intuition.
So, speak to me a bit about leadership and walking that line as a leader, whether you're a spiritual leader, a corporate leader, a guru, whatever. But speak to me about leadership and walking that line between being a mirror and holding authority. How do you do that? How do you see people do that?
That's a great question. I'm very thankful for the school I went to at the University of Santa Monica for spiritual psychology, because it was right after I started teaching Kundalini yoga. And as you mentioned, like certain things we do in Kundalini yoga can bring about, like lightning speed, a lot of things get churned up, right? And
Especially when you teach them.
well, thank you. But so people were coming to me after class with all these questions, and I know how to teach Kundalini yoga, but at the time I didn't know how to hold space in a way that I felt was like, is this appropriate? Is this a safe space? We didn't really get taught that. We got taught how to teach Kundalini yoga. But so I immediately enrolled in this program, this 2-year graduate program for spiritual psychology. And the very first thing we learned to do was zip it and just listen to the person, because I think as a leader, many people fall into the trap, like, I have so much to share, listen to me talk on and on and on and on. And that's, I'll use that word again, precarious, because if somebody comes to you, if you're, someone in your class comes to you and they have an issue, if you're immediately telling them what you feel is right or wrong, or what they should do or shouldn't do, it's really disempowering. But if you allow that person to just share what they're going through, just heartfelt listen, as long as they need to, they'll come to their own aha moments. And so, in that sense, being a leader can actually be like just another point on the circle. And there's no high, there's no low. There's no one above, there's no one below, but we're here in this together. And if you just hold space, I think that's true leadership, is just holding space.
And when you went back and read that memoir, for instance, um, is that what you felt like he did or didn't do?
Yeah, he didn't allow for any. This woman I'm speaking of is Pamela Dyson. She wrote the memoir White Bird and a Premka, which was the name that Yogi Bhajan gave her, White Bird in a Golden Cage. And she shared that she would have these inner monologues, so to speak, of what she wanted: a family, she wanted to marry, she wanted this, and she finally would muster the courage to share these desires, these heartfelt desires with him, and he would immediately shut them down and tell her why she couldn't do them and exert his authority, and like wouldn't listen at all to what she wanted. And it was it's different in a sense, whereas if somebody comes to you after a yoga class and, hey, what should I do or what can I do, and versus this is what I want to do, and getting shut down for that.
Mm.
But both of those situations are precarious if there's I guess I'll even say just a lack of education about how to hold space. And if the person's spiritual ego is wanting to dominate and they don't have a grasp of that, they don't have a grip on that.
That's an interesting term, that spiritual ego.
It's a real thing.
So when you start out on a spiritual practice, or when you've been on it for a while, how do you start to um, become aware of your spiritual ego?
I think this is common when people start off on a spiritual path, they're coming from a quote unquote secular path where, you know, different behaviors are prominent. You know, I was in a band. We played like secular music and I would tour the country and, you know, we were playing in bars and people drinking, people smoking, people, you know, just in that. And then there's nothing wrong with that per se, but it was just a different or group aura, I will say, like a different energy field of behaviors. And when I broke away from that because it just didn't feel healthy to me anymore, I noticed there was some cognitive cognitive dissonance within that arena. And so when Kundalini Yoga came into my life and I cleaned up, I stopped drinking, I stopped smoking marijuana, and um, then I sensed it, and I had to be very conscious of it because it didn't feel good. Like if I was being honest with myself, it didn't feel good, even though the ego felt good. Like I don't do that anymore, you know. Like I'm clean, like, you know, putting myself on a pedestal because I broke free from those behaviors, and that is just a trap. It doesn't, that is that is just a trap. But that is one sense where that was one area where I sensed I'm getting a spiritual ego.
Mm. And as you progress into teaching and leading, are there places where it pops up for you again?
um
I ask all of this. I mean, all of these questions I'm asking really because of what's happening, and I'm kind of thinking, well, what are the things for people to watch out for, both
mhm,
in themselves and also in others, in terms of others they might go learn from. But like, what are those things to be aware of? Because most of the time people hear this and they're like, no, don't want anything to do with it. Go away religion, go away spirituality, go away meditation, versus, or they walk in with, um, I like earlier how you spoke about the blind faith and the way you spoke about it, because I can imagine people looking at that in themselves in their own lives and being like, damn, why was I so naive? So like I think it ends up becoming either let me do this or let me stay away from it completely, or let me judge myself for believing. And so to get more nuance into this debate that can be so polarizing even in your own head, even in one's own head, what are those things to watch out for? So that's where I'm
mhm.
coming from.
It's a great question and it's very introspective. And when I think back to when I was first starting teaching,
Hmm.
my identity as a teacher was very important to me because I worked hard to get that certificate and so on and so forth. And so if anyone came to my class and, you know, just simply didn't like the yoga, you know, I took it very personally because I was so identified with it. So that's one thing I think is important to be aware of is how attached are you to your identity of something? And if it gets challenged in any way, you know, do you defend it in a way where you're right and they're wrong? And it's just like just the games the ego likes to play, because I would notice that there would be a person that would come to class and they would challenge or they just wouldn't want to do any of it and they would kind of roll their eyes at certain things. And you know, I'd have to like notice in my mind going, oh, they're not ready for this yet, or you know, like, which is just simply not true. You know, it's you get challenged a lot, especially at the beginning of teaching. You get challenged in ways like, you know, for a while, that in my community here in Santa Cruz, that, you know, people weren't showing up. I was one of the very few teachers here, and I would show up to my 8 a.m. Thursday morning class and no one would be there. So that was a whole other, side to the spiritual ego, like the bruised spiritual ego. But I think it just takes a lot of self-awareness to really understand the difference in vibration and the difference in frequencies between um, that of just loving kindness and being an open teacher that just teaches to teach and share versus one that attaches and identifies and wants to have that power. And this is where ethics come into play, and if you don't have a strong ethical compass, it's precarious. Yeah.
So let's get into this a bit. And I think this might be a great segue back to the very first thing you raised about compassion. But take that part away. Yeah.
Sorry, what was your question?
The question is, what would you say about ethics and where does compassion fit in? What is your experience with compassion right now as you maneuver what's going on?
I think compassion, and it's interesting as I'm saying this, I'm recognizing it as I learned it from Yogi Bhajan. Um, it's first and foremost, we have to have self-compassion. If we don't, and this is where my spiritual psychologies come into play, but that was a very strong teaching in the module of authentic relationships that Yogi Bhajan taught. Self-compassion is the foundation for all compassion. But in my studies with spiritual psychology, what I learned is that if we don't have that self-compassion component there, the self-judgment becomes so deeply ingrained that we don't even realize when we're projecting outward. Our judgments turn outward because we're not taking ownership of the things that are dissonant in our own relationship with ourselves. So
Question here. In the way that so many traditions and people say that the world is a mirror and what we think of others is what we think of ourselves, from that perspective, and tell me if this is all rubbish, but from that perspective, how do the kinds of emotions, thoughts, and potentially judgments one might have of a community leader provide a fertile ground for self-growth in terms of looking in to see what shadows and cobwebs one can clear about oneself?
it's a it's a beautiful fertile ground for that, but the awareness has to be present to sort of catch ourselves if we're in the act of projection. And so once we're aware, then we can work our process with it. We can say, hold up, hold up. Where is this occurring within myself? Where is the judgment towards myself? And where can I take ownership of that and heal that? And when you heal those judgments towards yourself, when you reframe so that you turn the judgment into a very compassionately spoken truth about yourself, then those people that we project onto, we're only projecting onto them because they're triggering us in some way. They're holding up that mirror, as you mentioned, and triggering something within us. So once we heal that within ourselves, then the triggers actually dissolve, because we can totally be in acceptance of the other because we've accepted it within ourselves. And this is just the human condition. We're all either beautifully flawed or we're absolutely perfect, but we have to look at everyone the same way.
Would you be willing to share an example?
Let me think of.
Nice, that's a hard question.
Yeah. I've done I have done a lot of work with this. Trying to find one that won't take a long time to describe any backstory. um,
I appreciate it.
I'll just say I'll say a funny one. But with my husband, you know, I'll look around the house and I'll just be like, oh, just get really frustrated with the fact that he's got a room, like his man cave is just full of old cups that he never puts away. And, I start getting into that mode of like, you know, naggy wife mode.
Mhm.
And then if I really stop myself and like look around, like 90% of the things in disarray in our house are because of me. Like, but I'm like, I have to catch myself. Like I'm judging myself because I'm like, so overloaded with a lot of work that I don't have the time to take care of the household chores as much as I want to. And I get down on myself about that subconsciously, unconsciously, consciously. It's, there's a monologue going on of like, you need to do better with your housework and blah 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 blah. Gosh, why don't you why do you waste your time? And so I have that going on.
And that's come up recently or been highlighted recently.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then if I don't sort of apply love there, then what happens is that I can be stressed or off balance, and then I'll just like yell at my husband about his mess.
How does one go about feeling compassion to figures of authority um, that um, that one feels manipulated by or hurt by?
This is a big one. You know, I don't think, well, I'll say this. I think it's important to not bypass anything and just go straight to compassion if you're not feeling it. You know what I mean? Everyone has their different process with grief and anger and all the emotions that come forward, especially those that have been directly abused. So I think what's important to have awareness about is that this is systemic. The issues that we're facing with, it's not just an isolated event. The reason we're seeing all these different gurus exposed for their shadow side and their abuse is because it is a systemic issue. And when we understand it is systemic, then we can take the person or the face out of it and look at what is the root cause of this, and really let's go there so that we can have transformative justice around this. So it's not just about vilifying. And actually I want to talk about something where there's a dynamic that goes nowhere, heals nothing, when we get into a triangle, because this is a power struggle here and a loop that keeps reoccurring in our global history, but also in our personal experiences, where at any point in time you can find yourself on one of these points, and there's a point that's the victim, there's a point that's the perpetrator, and then there's a point that's the savior. And there's different dynamics and power that are very hard to get out of if we identify with one of these points so strongly that our stance completely misses the root of the systemic issue. And you brought that up with your friend who thought you should deal with someone differently, like their expectation of you was, different than what you were expressing, and so they got in the car accident. Like, we can take a stance so strongly that we end up in one of those 3 points, and it's like a trench, where we vilify the perpetrator, where if you're a savior, you identify so strongly with saving that, There's the ego present there. There's the righteousness, self-righteousness there. So this is all power dynamics. Then identifying to varying degrees with the victimhood will disable a person from becoming a survivor, So when we look at it systemically, we come to a circle where we all want to be healed from this. We don't need to point fingers, although it's important to first and foremost take a trauma-informed approach where we center the healing and center our love and attention to those that have been harmed, and create safe spaces so that future harm does not happen. And then also we have to allow the person that has perpetrated harm, like look at the word perpetrator, they are perpetuating harm. So somewhere down their line or in their DNA history, there has been abuse as well. And so this transformative justice approach to it is getting everyone to the circle and allowing everyone to have a voice and heal and receive the help they need, the resources they need. So it's a very loving approach when we and I feel like it's the way that we're going to actually move as a society out of this dynamic. Because I've been watching on social media the vitriol and the rage, which by all means, if it's there in a person, they need to be able to express that. And at what point are we then ready to move into the next scope of healing? And, it can't be rushed, it can't be bypassed, but ultimately we have to look at the root of this as a systemic issue, a patriarchal systemic issue that's dismantling. And the way to dismantle it, like the shift into, the Aquarian age is geometric, from this power, this pyramid, to the circle, and very much from the patriarchal society to, I think, I don't even want to say matriarchal. I just want to say,
Androgynous?
Yes. And I love how behind you there's this beautiful circle.
Compassion in that switch. I mean, how does someone listening to you do something in their everyday life that can be done, because a systemic problem can make someone think, well, what do I do? Run for president? So what is something someone can do about this?
Well, I feel like if you've experienced abuse directly, being in spaces where, safe spaces where you can allow your voice to be heard and healed, so that you don't have to go through this alone. So I think it can be so isolating, and to just give voice to your experience and have another person say, I'm with you in this, I hear you in this, is so important. So the therapy that's needed, or the resources for healing and reconciling any abuse, is so important. It's like the number one first step in the road to healing and compassion. I think that as far as in communities, it's the road to compassion, I feel like, is an individual road, and ideally everyone's walking towards that compassionate path. But I'm sure there will be, the myriad of detours and twists and turns on that road. And so, but if everyone is at the root of their intentions, hoping to get to that place of healing and resolve, then it will be felt on the macro scale.
Mm.
But I think it can often take a while for people to really even desire that. And, everyone's pace at which they go about it is personal.
Is there anything else on your heart that you'd like to share? I remember.
I think what's been like a personal mantra lately has just been rest as much as you want, self-care, and really having beautiful conversations like this with people, with friends, and moving forward with respect to a practice that you've always loved, that you started probably not because of a guru, but it's from their lineage, is also a very interesting conversation, because there's a lot of suspicion around, well, are these pure teachings if they come from someone that displayed impure actions? And so the last thing that I feel is important to address is the power in understanding and listening to your own energy and your own voice. We touched on this earlier. So that when you go to a yoga class, for example, and your teacher is instructing you on what to do, what posture to take, what breath to do, what mantra, if there are signals in your body that are saying, no, I don't want to do that, go there and distinguish. Is it because why, and just do a lot of self-discovery. And if you're getting those alarms, then don't. You never have to do anything your teacher is saying for you to do. If you recognize, oh, that's just my stubborn voice that didn't even want to be here to begin with, so I might as well just try this. And afterwards, ask yourself, do I feel better? Or do I feel worse? Or do I feel the same? This is it's a road of self-inquiry, but I think it's really going to liberate us all on a larger scope, because I feel like we're really being asked by the universe to understand ourselves, to know thyself, and really, step into our own sovereignty, which is so important. And sometimes it takes these intense situations to really understand what personal sovereignty is.
Ooh, I love how you posited that journey to personal sovereignty and that journey to to ask yourself as both intuitive and data driven. Like both intuitive in terms of what you're perceiving in the moment, and also at the end, well, did I feel better after that or not? And let me iterate. Yeah.
Yeah, because yoga can be an incredibly helpful self-diagnostic tool.
Mm, beautiful, beautiful. There were two other things you said that just keep coming up to me. One was on stands and how everyone's path through this is different.
Mhm.
And the other was erasing the name, or also like the quote in the name. Like, how can a teaching be pure if the teacher isn't? Is there anything you want to add to either of those threads before we come circle?
Yeah. Well, when I was asked when this was starting, someone asked me, "Well, what's your stance?" And immediately I said, "My stance is in my heart. My stance is in getting to the root of this on a systemic level, so that we all heal this, so that we're not vilifying, we're not demonizing, that we realize that if somebody is perpetrating harm, that very they're very ill and they need help. It doesn't excuse their actions, it doesn't not hold them accountable. And at the same time, if we don't allow these people to get help, if we're just so punitive, it's, we're in a punitive society right now, and we can see the ramifications of that, and that it's not improving our situation one iota.
Mm.
So if we really want to get to the root of the systemic issues, we have to realize that we have to come to that circle, like I mentioned. And I think it's a personal journey with the resonance of teachings, and removing the guru from it. I absolutely, there's a number of things I do on a daily basis that I can say I learned this pattern of behavior that has very much transformed my life for the better because of this man that was known as Yogi Bhajan. And so it's about locating my truth and be like, this is truth for me, that doing this particular meditation or this particular we do this clearing of the mouth in the morning, like that has worked for me, and I learned it from him. So I think that when we step into compassion, we have the capacity to see both the beautiful light in a person and their shadow.
Beautiful. Thank you, Charan.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Is there anything at all you'd like to add?
I just want to express my gratitude to you for allowing me to come on here and process, and the space in which you hold is so graceful. When we had that initial conversation, I was very much in my visceral feelings about everything, and the things that you just shared with me really helped.
Happy to hear that. I think,
Mm-hmm.
like you said earlier, when I asked you, how do we move past something systemic? When one people go through their inner process, it changes. So, yeah. Please tell us about the free gift that you're offering.
Well, my husband and I create music, and sometimes it's like very upbeat dance music. So this is one it's a track that's a private track, and it's from the Sri Guru Granth Sahib. It's just a very short shabad, and this shabad is all about the looking through life and through the eyes of being fully supported by God, and that all of the bounty of the season that is before you is blessing you. So it's this affirmation, which is a very prosperous affirmation, that I'm continually blessed, and I'm very grateful for these blessings. And so yeah, you can download it if you want, or you can just stream it on Spotify, or not. It's not on Spotify, on SoundCloud.
Ooh, how delicious. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited. Great having you on here, Charan. Thank you so much.
Thank you.